Deathbringer here. I heard a human once wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer. Fool! He should have grabbed his gods by the throat and made them build him a new world with Tailspire. Dun 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 da. That makes no sense to me.
You're supposed to do it Beavis and Butthead style.
What is a Beavis?
No dungeon in the history of Dungeons & Dragons is as famous or infamous as Gary Gygax's Tomb of Horrors. Originally designed as a tournament for Origins in 1975, Tomb has been revised several times, including in the 5e book Tales of the Yawning Portal, and it's left thousands of dead characters in its halls. Dungeon Magazine ranked the Tomb as the third greatest D&D adventure of all time, and was referenced in the book Ready Player One. But not everyone is enamored with this classic. Some believe it's a killer dungeon, it's arbitrary, and it's unfair. XP to level 3 called it the worst dungeon ever, and his playthrough ended with a TPK. I recently ran the Tomb of Horrors for my group, and I'm going to share my experiences. I'm going to show you how to prep it and give you some tips today on Dungeon Craft.
Deathbringer here. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and sign up for the Deathbringer RPG newsletter below.
Welcome to Dungeon Craft. I'm Professor Dungeon Master, and this channel is about homebrew and independent Dungeons & Dragons and other tabletop role-playing games. If you or someone you know ever stuck their head into the green devil face, you want to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and click all to get all our videos. You can support the channel and get bonus content, including access to my notebook, by becoming a patron at the link below. Thanks to all the patrons for making this content possible. Today we're talking Tomb of Horrors, and I'm going to give you some tips, I'm going to show you my notebook, and I've invited some other dungeon tubers to share their experiences and tips for the Tomb as well. Now I want to say I enjoyed the video by XP to level 3. Jacob seemed to do a good job at running it. He ran the adventure exactly as it was written, and his players were pretty good. They played the adventure as it was written, so no shade on them. However, I don't think any module illustrates the difference between old school D&D and modern D&D more than the Tomb of Horrors.
It all started in the 1970s in the basement of a Wisconsin cobbler. Okay, let me tell you about this tomb I've got for you, man, because this thing is going to be freaking legendary. First thing you do when you get here is you're going to see a big-ass hill. It's got this big-ass grin of face on it, right? Kind of looks like a jack-o'-lantern. Think it's Halloween inside, but no, it ain't Halloween, it is death, because this is a skull, man. As you try to get inside that tomb, you're going to look near the eyes, the nose, the teeth, anything like that, try to find that hidden door. It ain't there, because you got to go up around the backside where there's a bunch of weeds and stuff. You got to dig around there like you're looking for a lice inside the scalp of a dirty little kid. You're going to find 3 entrances. Now, the first 2 entrances, they just hold death. The third one, it holds humiliation and death, which is what we like to call adventure. As you get in there, man, you're going to come across this big, long hallway, and there's Sarek, the demi-leech. He's got this little riddle that's all in there. It's telling you how you're going to die, but ain't nobody going to listen to Sarek, the demi-leech, when he's going to be telling you the freaking truth. Now, at the back of this hallway, you're going to come across my pizza resistance. Big green-ass double face like this, that's mouth open, like that, and it looks really tempting if you know what I mean, because player characters, they got to stick everything inside a hole whenever they see one. I learned that in a Cincinnati truck stop. Anyway, if they stick anything in there, just like in that truck stop, boom, it is gone. It is annihilated, never to be seen again. Teach them a lesson about that. Wish I'd been learned that one earlier. Anyway, next to that, in case you don't go for the devil face, it's a big, floating, misty veil. It's kind of like a blinking lights around it, like that game Simon, if you played that thing. Now, if you step through that and you don't do the Simon right, you're going to pop right back out the front of the tomb, completely buck-ass naked with bits and parts all swinging in the wind. And Susie Merkowitz, you had that crush on in 10th grade, she is going to see what you're packing, and she is not going to be impressed with that. So you don't want to go back home. You don't want to get no pants because you don't want Susie Merkowitz to see you. So you're going to go right back inside the tomb. And that is how a Serac gets you, brother. Because he steals your pants, then he eats your soul. And he knows you don't want to go back out there and have Susie see you. And once you go inside, there's 1,000 more ways to die, brother. You can go in there. There's a steamroller that's made out of an elephant or something like that. There's these doors that bleed and you can drown inside of them. There's another set of that misty door. And you think, man, if the last one took away my pants, maybe I'll go back through and get my pants back. But no, it ain't going to give you no pants back. It's going to take away your bits and parts. It's going to do reverse sex on you. So now you're naked and the different gender like that, man. It is great. The one in there is a bunch of pillars. You touch one of the pillars, you go bouncing away like a lost balloon, floating away off into the ether. Kind of like when my little girl lost her balloon. She's all like, Daddy, I lost my balloon. Give me my balloon back. And I can't, little girl. It's gone forever. Kind of like your player characters are going to be. So you want to play it?
The tomb requires a certain mindset. And in fact, that was Gary Gygax's intention. He deliberately wanted to defy player expectations and to shake those tropes that had already calcified at the time, as well as the path dependency that comes with learning the mechanics of the game. Tomb was originally designed for character levels 10 to 14, and that is the first fake out, because you automatically think, well, I need to have a lot of hit points. I need to have spells like Fireball and Lightning Bolt and powerful magic items like a +5 Holy Avenger. Fact is, the tomb could probably be beaten by a group of 5th level characters with +1 swords and access to a bunch of 1st and 2nd level utility spells. You will need a bag of holding, but that's a pretty common magic item. There's one found, I think, in room 22 in the tomb, and there's one that comes with the pre-generated characters that come with the modules. But the biggest challenge here is the answer to these puzzles are not found on the character sheet. Now, my other adaptations, the Caves of Chaos, which I turned into the Caves of Carnage, the Lost City, and the Reviled Society, they took great liberties with the plots and the situations. But here, I wanted to stick as closely to Gary Gygax's script as possible, because I don't think you could say you beat the tomb unless you beat Gary Gygax's tomb.
Somewhere under a foreboding hill lies the crypt of the demi-lich Acererak. Legends say Acererak amassed a fortune in gold, gems, jewels, and magic items. But his heart was so filled with greed and malice, he designed his tomb as a death trap for those brave or foolish enough to enter. Over the centuries, thousands of heroes have entered the tomb, but only a handful have emerged. Lured by rumors of fabulous wealth, you have traveled to the Skull Mound, and that is where your adventure begins.
Before running the tomb, I reduced the entire module to 2 facing pages. It helps me wrap my mind around the concepts and run the tomb with minimal flipping. So I copied things like monster stat blocks, and I drew diagrams of the traps so I knew how they worked. Even the portals, I colored in the gems and put arrows indicating what order they need to be pressed. Even though it's only 16, 17 pages, Tomb of Horrors is very dense with long paragraphs with important information embedded in them. And I find it very helpful to go over the module very carefully and transcribe it into my notebook, so that I really know it inside out and I never need to stop to look something up. Now, the first obstacle for 5th edition players is, why are they going to this tomb in the first place? If you're playing 1st edition, it's very simple. 1 gold piece equals 1 experience point. So if you want to get experience points and you want to get up levels, you're going to have to go into increasingly more dangerous places and situations. Modern milestone XP incentivizes following story objectives, but it just doesn't work as well for this type of scenario. I can't think of a good plot hook as to why the characters would risk their lives in a game where treasure doesn't matter. And I think it's one of the reasons the tomb just doesn't translate well to 5e. I would suggest, no matter what edition you play, you use the pre-gen characters from the back of the module. I gave each of them 2, 1 a regular character and 1 a backup in case their character bit the dust. Now, a little bit about my group. I had 7 players. 1 had played the tomb way back in high school but didn't really remember it, and the rest of my players range from 20s to 50s, with experience with all different versions and editions of D&D. So they've all got rope spikes, 10-foot poles, lanterns, torches, oil, and whatever you would need in a dungeon, and I allowed them to take one mundane item each, so they could take a shovel if they wanted. A ladder would be the most useful common item. Some of them took henchmen, which is very aligned with first edition AD&D. You had a lot of henchmen, and these guys could check ahead, check for traps, and carry the treasure out of the tomb. The entrance to the tomb is hidden under a skull-shaped mound. The north face is different. If the players bought picks and shovels, it's way easier to dig it out, but it's still not that hard a problem to solve. And my players were very clever. They used Speak with Animals, a second-level spell, to talk to the forest critters and ask them, hey, which is the most commonly used entrance to this tomb? And the squirrels told them, well, nobody comes out of the left or right sides. A lot of people go into the middle, and far fewer of them come out, and most of them are screaming and naked. So the players correctly surmised that the middle path was the correct one.
The Tomb of Horrors often gets a bad rap as a mean-spirited, killer, evil dungeon that's just meant to destroy everybody's favorite character. And it is a difficult dungeon, to be sure, but it's important to remember that it was written originally as a tournament dungeon, where groups of players only had a couple hours to try to get through it or get as far as they could into it. And so it is very challenging, and it's written to test the players themselves and to test their patience and ingenuity. So when you're playing it or running it, you want to bear in mind that there's a bit of a meta to this dungeon. It was really designed to try to get players thinking, to put them under pressure, to make them worrying about the time left so that they would start becoming impatient and making bad moves and bad decisions. Because really, if you approach the Tomb of Horrors with patience and with a methodical manner, you can get really far into it. And so again, if you run this for your players that you play in it, just keep that in mind and know that it's a classic in D&D history. It's kind of in a category all its own, and it's meant to test players on a different level than a lot of dungeons are.
Room 3, the entrance, contains a mosaic floor littered with pit traps, a winding red tile path that leads around and then through them, a fresco framed by two jackal-headed humanoids holding a chest that juts out of the wall, a painting of a demonic creature with his scaled hands grasping bars, a stone green devil face with a sphere of annihilation in its mouth, a magic portal that leads to room 7, and a riddle carved in runes on the floor. No matter what edition you play, the pit traps are super easy, barely an inconvenience. In 5e, everyone has passive perception of like 30, so they could just see them. My group just lined up their henchmen with 10-foot poles and tapped every tile. One henchman died and was the first casualty, but all of the traps were revealed. One of Gary Gygax's groups bought 30 pigs for 90 gold pieces and let them loose in the room, triggering every trap. The cryptic poem reads, "Go back to the tormentor or through the arch, and the second great hall you'll discover.
Shun green if you can, but night's good color is for those of great valor. If shades of red stand for blood, the wise will not need sacrifice aught but a loop of magical metal. 2 pits along the way will be found to lead to a fortuitous fall, so check the wall. These keys and those are the most important of all, and beware trembling hands and what will maul. If you find false, you find the true, and into the columned hall you'll come, and there the throne that's key and key. The iron men of visage grim do more than meets the viewer's eye. You left and found my tomb.
And now your souls will die." So my players love riddles and puzzles, and it's not just one of them. It's like 3 of them. They could solve any riddle in about 30 seconds. And they were like, it's obvious. Don't touch the green devil face.
Can't touch this.
Don't follow the red path.
Can't touch this.
And the secret door behind the tormentor is the painting of the monster holding the bars. My wife Michelle was the de facto leader of this party, and this is where she established her mantra, oft repeated throughout the session. Number 1, don't touch anything.
Can't touch this.
Unless you know why you're touching it, hands off. And number 2, eyes on the prize. If it doesn't have to do with the main treasure, leave it alone. We're not picking up loose change. They did stick a torch into the green devil face just to see what would happen, and half of it disappeared. I've heard stories of players crawling into the hole, but that's not the way the sphere works. If you stuck your head in, the rest of your body would just fall out without a head. They looked at the gems in the portal and decided to ignore it because the riddle revealed the exit is behind the tormentor, so why go through the portal at all? If the characters press the right combination, yellow, blue, orange, the mist disappears, revealing a passage to room 11, which is helpful but not necessary. If you get the combination wrong, they're teleported back to the entrance, or 7, the prison room. But my players ignored all this stuff, just peeled back the tormentor wallpaper and crept down the hallway, on high alert for any denizens that might be lurking there. Room 8 contains a 4-armed gargoyle. Not a tough fight, and the players got the gems from around his neck, which they need for later. Room 9 contains a series of secret doors. I always imagined as a kid that when it said an elf finds a secret door on a 1 to 4, they just find it and open it. But this module suggests you have to tell the game master exactly how you open it, which results in a game that resembles Bop It. Lift it, push it, pull it, bop it, bop it, bop it. If the players take too long, they get hit with a magic arrow for d6 points of damage, times 7 secret doors, which works out to about 25 net points of damage. Divided by 10 characters, it's like 2.5 hit points of damage. Super easy, barely an inconvenience. And I gotta admit, this room is not much fun, and if you're gonna modify any one, this is the one I would suggest you do something different with. Room 10 is a bunch of tiles painted with animals and human-like creatures holding colored spheres. And my players instantly surmised from the riddle that the black globe would reveal the way out. It leads to the evil chapel, room 14. But they were curious and they touched pretty much every globe, revealing passages to rooms 11 and 13. And this is where they actually split the party, going in 3 different directions. Room 11 contains a broken gargoyle statue that resembles the one found in room 8. If the players put the gem from that room in the gargoyle's hands, it crushes them and produces a magic gem of true seeing, which, although not essential, is very useful for detecting the many secret doors in this dungeon. Room 13 contains 3 chests. One contains venomous snakes, another contains a spear trap, another contains a giant skeleton. This is the one my players opened, and the skeleton popped out, completely missed with a 2, and the players just said, F this, and ran away. So they regrouped to enter Area 14, the Chapel of Evil.
Good evening, Dungeon Masters. I'm Baron DeRopp, and no, I'm not dead yet. About 10 years ago, I really started to gain notoriety as a Dungeon Master in my local convention circuit, and this reputation led me to my first professional Dungeon Mastering experience, which was inadvertently broadcast online back when that sort of thing wasn't even being done by Critical Role yet, and it involved the Tomb of Horrors. I was invited onto the now-defunct Get to the Good Part podcast, who had been working through a chapter-by-chapter review of the book Ready Player One. As a capstone to finally getting through the book, they rented out a brewpub/pinball arcade called Suttrie's High Gravity, and I dungeon mastered for the podcast's hosts and a few of their most hardcore fans who were invited to the event through a 1980s pop culture reskin of the Tomb of Horrors. This event was a decade or so ago, so I can't remember all of the Acererak puzzles that got reskinned, but I do specifically remember the chapel puzzle was reconfigured to have its walls painted to look like the Twin Pines tree farm from Back to the Future, and the puzzle that needed to be solved to get to the next room involved a DeLorean time machine streaking into the chapel from nowhere as its license plate fell off the car, revealing the passphrase, "out of time," which the players had to figure out before the chapel burned down around them thanks to the DeLorean's time traveling. I got paid $20 and free beer for the evening. Good times.
Gygax's chapel had no time-traveling DeLoreans, but it does have a bunch of traps. A bunch of pews that hide a chunk of treasure, but also poison gas, an evil glowing altar, a skeletal hand pointing to a magical orange doorway, and a coin-operated secret door that's hinted at in the riddle. Stepping into the portal changes the character's gender and alignment, but if they go through again, they can't switch back. This can be potentially a huge problem in the first edition where paladins, for example, must be lawful good or they lose their powers. And to be honest, I hate this encounter. It's not dangerous, it's not deadly, it's not challenging, it has no bearing on the main objective. It's really just a distracting time waster, and a game master will lose nothing by cutting it. My players did not touch the altar.
Can't touch this.
And solve the secret door riddle. The wise need not sacrifice aught but a loop of magical metal in about 3 seconds flat. You just drop a +1 ring in the slot and the door opens. Super easy, barely an inconvenience. And at this point, they were halfway through the dreaded Tomb of Horrors with full hit points and only 1 NPC casualty.
So the Tomb of Horrors is a little bit before my time, but I have played the 5e sort of remake of it, Tomb of Annihilation, and the room in this dungeon that stands out the most to me, with forever baked in my gaming memories, is based on a room from the original Tomb of Horrors. In that one, it was filled with blood, and in this one, it filled with wine and was also a false treasure room. And my party was so insistent that there must be real treasure in here, that even understanding that the room itself was also a trap one of them activated everything and was nearly drowned in the wine, but only survived by petitioning to their deity, sacrificing some of the features granted by this deity to turn that wine into water. And then they were able to cast water breathing on themselves and survive. So it's just a super cool example of how pitting yourself in these life or death moments can lead to such epic ideas and memorable encounters. Great stuff.
So they descend the stairs and they find the 3 traps in the hall, which they were completely expecting because they were probing ahead with 10-foot poles and the riddle hinted that those traps would be there. And they immediately said, hey, fortuitous fall, there's got to be a secret door down there, and they were able to find it with the Gem of True Seeing. Completely avoided the tilting floor trap into the fire pit that is Area 16. Even if they had gone down this hallway, none of them would have been killed because of their marching order. This is how most characters go down halls, in a tight, bunched formation. That is not what my players did. They staggered themselves out every 5 feet, single file, and tied a rope around the first few characters' waists. That way, if someone fell into a slide or a pit, the next character in line could pull them back. And this marching order allowed them to detect the fear gas in Area 18. The first PC tried to run, but they just reeled him back in with the rope, and then they held their breaths, opened the south door, causing the gas to dissipate. Room 18 contains fake Acererak, who says,
"Who dares disturb the tomb of Acererak? It is your death you have found."
It's really just a zombie with 32 hit points, and after hitting him 3 times with the magic mace found near the doorway, the zombie collapsed and the roof started to cave in, with me counting down 10, 9, 8, 7. The players described how they were grabbing whatever treasure they could before running out. And they all made it out except for the dwarf, who insisted on trying to pull a Acererak's solid gold couch out of the room and up the stairs. He was buried in the cave-in. Of course it was an illusion, but I just let the character die because the player felt that it would be a dramatic end for a very greedy dwarf, and he wanted to play his backup character. And none of my players believed this was actually a Acererak, so they went to room 19. There are 3 vats. One contains dirty water, the second contains acid, the third contains an ochre jelly. 2 of the vats contain 2 halves of a golden key, which reforms the Acererak's soul, although there's no way for the players to know this, and it opens the final treasure vault. Now, I screwed up here. They tipped the vats over and just grabbed the key. The vats are supposed to be too heavy to tip. But the spell Unseen Servant, which they had, it's a simple first level spell, would have allowed them to just pull the key right out of these vats without suffering any damage. And they would have just pulled the keys out in seconds, so I don't think that made a big difference in the outcome of the adventure. 20 is a huge pit trap filled with spikes. My players just ferried themselves across with Tensor's floating disc, another common first level spell. 21 is the agitated chamber, whose floor bucks and swells. The players quickly found the exit door behind the tapestries, which turned to green slime if torn, but they just gently moved them aside with a 10-foot pole. They turned south at the intersection, avoiding the pit trap by probing ahead with the 10-foot pole, bringing them to the secret door behind a false door, behind which is a secret trap door, all of which can be revealed with the Gem of True Seeing. Now the module says, quote, "The most likely place that will be found, however, is the passage full of sleep gas." Nope. My player said, eyes on the prize, and went down the stairs. So, autopsy. Why did Jacob's group die? Area 23A is a hallway filled with sleep gas, which allows for no saving throw. Then sleeping characters are rolled over and insta-killed by a magic steamroller around the corner. And this is where Jacob's group met their end. But even if my group had gone to Area 23A, only the first character in the marching order would have been affected. The text says, quote, "Everyone in this passage will instantly collapse in slumber." However, because there are 5 feet separating them, that character would have just fallen asleep, and the rest of the party would have just pulled him by his rope to safety. I'm not saying my players are better. I'm saying game mechanics incentivize certain types of behaviors, and with those mechanics comes certain expectations. And one expectation is, if you have 200 hit points, you're not going to die in one shot or be insta-killed.
I begged him to play. Dad, let's play a game. Let's play a game. I'd be surprised if I was more than 11 years old. I think I was younger, 10. He took me to the Tomb of Horrors. I went through one of the misty portals that teleports all of your physical possessions to the end to a Acererak's treasure room, right? And you are transported to the beginning, sans any of your equipment. So you're naked and unafraid. I continued adventuring very foolishly, and I found my way into a room with 3 levers, and I pushed the levers up, as I recall, and that opens up a pit that drops you 100 feet down. I had over 100 hit points. We rolled the damage. I survived, but that was the last time I played that character. I was at the bottom of the pit, no equipment, no way to get out. So that was pretty harsh. So was he a killer DM? Well, he could be hard, right?
My players found their way to room 25, the column hall, which I described with all its opulence and floating columns, and Michelle said, "Can't touch this. There's an electric blue door. Can't touch this. A violet portal. Can't touch this. A red gem surrounded by skeletons. Can't touch this. Can't touch this." And they quickly figured out how to find the secret door with the crown and scepter and weren't fooled by the fake treasure vault in Area 30 and used the Gem of True Seeing to locate the secret door to reveal the real treasure chamber of Acererak. So part of the floor rose to the ceiling, crushing one of the henchmen and raising the body count to 3, and revealing massive piles of gems, magic items, and the jeweled skull of Acererak in illustration 33A. And I asked my players, "Do you want to touch it?" To which they replied, "Can't touch this, can't touch this, can't touch this." Instead, they took their bag of holding, carefully placed it over the skull, shut the bag without ever putting their fingers on it. Then they took it back to room 3 and chucked it in the green devil face. Can't touch this. Instantly destroying Acererak and beating the tomb in 4 hours, 15 minutes without ever drawing a weapon on him.
Now, tradition has it that Gary Gygax created this adventure after his players boasted how unstoppable and powerful their characters were. So, Gary, instead of creating a legitimate challenge to test his high-level characters' characters, he created what might possibly be the game's first series of DM screwjobs and spliced them all together into an adventure.
When it comes to the Tomb of Horrors, the thing that probably bugs me the most about that module is the way that it just isn't honest with you about the kind of adventure that it is. Right at the start, Gary calls it a thinking man's adventure, and it is the opposite of that. It's one of the few adventures that I've seen that goes out of the way to punish players who actually think about the problems that they're in and try and come up with reasonable solutions. A lot of these solutions to some of the obstacles, like the misty doorway, are actually arbitrary. There are no clues for it. You just try every possible combination until something works. And even then, sometimes you still get punished.
Reach into that hole, touch that orb, and bam! Rocks fall, you die.
Were you smart enough to bring the right spells or the right special abilities to try and find some of these problems so that they don't kill you? The dungeon arbitrarily says that they just don't work.
I view the Tomb of Horrors more as a trip down memory lane than an example to be followed.
As far as I can see it, there's really only 2 ways to beat the Tomb of Horrors. One of these is just brute forcing it. Bring in a ton of hirelings to try everything, or a classic solution is get an entire herd of pigs and just herd them ahead of you into the dungeon, setting off all the traps so you can see where all the danger is. The other solution, I think, is to get just as petty as Gary Gygax and go way outside the box to circumvent all of his evil GM tactics. For example, hire an entire team of, say, dwarves to excavate the entire top of the hill off so you can just see the outline of the dungeon and pop down through the roofs into the rooms where you want to go.
But that's just what I think. What do you think? Let us know down in the comments. Oh crap, I think I just stole Professor DM's line. Well, it wouldn't be the first time.
Is Tomb of Horrors really the 3rd greatest adventure of all time? It depends on your players. My players loved it, at least the problem-solving ones did. Certain elements do seem arbitrary and make little sense, like 100-foot hallways to nowhere. Fireballs don't damage Acererak, but a shatter spell causes 10 hit points of damage. Like, how are the players supposed to know that? But as my players prove, the module can be beaten by clever players who don't rely on their character sheets to solve problems. And whether you like Tomb of Horrors or hate it, one thing is for certain, you will never forget it. But that's what I think. What do you think? Put your best stories in the comments below. Thanks to all my special guests for sharing their memories about the Tomb of Horrors. And thanks so much to you for stopping by. I'll see you next time. May all your rolls be 20s.
Deathbringer again with a bedtime story. Good night, Tomb. Good night, Doom. Good night, Devilface, in the very first room. Good night, Ranger, who picked the wrong door. Good night, Thief, who died wanting more. Good night, Hope. Good night, Air. Good night, corpses everywhere. For more soothing content, click on the Lost City and get a Deathbringer mini and my game at the links below.